Hello and welcome to Cultures at Midnight. It is currently 12:53 in the morning, so we're 7 minutes off, but we still made it as long as we finish within the 7 minutes before I have to change the title. The podcast where I dive into various cultures and give you basic information in history. Today we're going to discuss the country of Greece, and more specifically a little bit more about its mythology, architecture, art, and a very important historic event that happened in the country of Greece. Oh, my apologies. To start the informative part, let's dive into Athena's history. Athena was the Olympian goddess of wisdom and good counsel, war, the defense of towns, heroic endeavor, weaving, pottery, and various other crafts. To me, I think it's pretty ironic that Athena was the goddess of the defense of towns because of the city that was named after her was very heavily involved in war. But we will get to that topic later, the topic of war and all that. The city named after her, the city of Athens, was named after Athena because of a competition that she had won with Poseidon. Athena and Poseidon had started a competition to see who could become the city's patron god. Each deity gave the people of the city a gift, and whichever gift those people of the city saw as more beneficial, that deity would become the patron god of the city. Athena gifted the city an olive tree, and Poseidon gave the city a saltwater spring. And the city, through a whole series of events, found that the olive tree was more beneficial to the city than the saltwater spring. So the city just named Athena the patron goddess and renamed the city after her. But not only was Athena the goddess of wisdom, war, and many other things, Athena was also known as a helper throughout mythological stories. Athena has been told to have helped heroes like Jason, Perseus, Hercules, and others, and just throughout all of their trials and tribulations. But going back to the city of Athens, on the Acropolis of Athens, overlooking the city, sat a building named the Parthenon. The Parthenon was the center of religious life in the powerful Greek city-state of Athens, the head of the Delian League. The Parthenon was developed to thwart the possibility of an attack by the Persian Empire or other city-states nearby. The Delian League was a cooperative alliance of Greek city-states founded in 478 BC during the invasions of the Persian Wars. However, the Parthenon found on the Acropolis is not the original today. In a war from 492 to 490 BCE, the Athens played a central role in the defeat of the Persians. So 10 years later, when the Persians returned to Greece, they made for Athens. Nor that when they took the city, they destroyed it with like immense intensity. In the destruction of the city, they had paid special attention to the Acropolis, which was Athens' citadel. The Persians not only looted the rich sanctuaries at the summit, but also burned the buildings, overturned the statues, and smashed the pots there. For the next 30 years, the Athenians experimented with a range of strategies to come to terms with their history. They left temples in ruins, despite the fact that the Acropolis continued to be a working sanctuary. They did, however, rebuild the walls of the citadel, incorporating within them some fire-damaged materials from the destroyed temples. They also created a new, more level surface on the Acropolis through terracing. In this fill, they burned all the sculptures damaged in the Persian attack. But also, another major piece of architecture found in Delphi, Greece, was the Temple of Apollo, dedicated to the obviously Apollo. When visitors approached Delphi, the first structure that they would always see was the sanctuary of Athena. Visitors would then walk along what they called the Sacred Way, a path to the sanctuary of Apollo. The central and most important part of Delphi was the Temple of Apollo, where the Pythia princess delivered her prophetic words in the Adyton, a separate restricted room at the rear. The Temple of Apollo sat atop a large terrace supported by a polygonal wall, sort of like the Acropolis. It just sits over top of everything. However, the temple had been built and destroyed multiple times, The first stone temple on the site was built in about 650 BC. It was a lot smaller than its subsequent replacements, and it was constructed from limestone but destroyed by fire in 548 BC. Construction of the second temple began in 506 BC. It took 4 years to build and was financed by all of the Greek city-states. It was slightly larger than its predecessor, and the third temple's construction also began in 396 BC. But it was not completed until the 3rd century BC due to the Sacred Wars. Again, the third temple was financed by all of the Greek city-states, but most of the money from the project came from the Phoenicians, who were fined for the damage that they had caused to Delphi. That is a whole... The Sacred Wars is... If you guys have time on your own, go look into those. It is a large part of the Greeks' history, and especially Delphi and that Temple of Apollo. But on a different side of it, another important part of Greek culture is actually the art that goes into all of these temples and sanctuaries. One piece of art that has been recently found, well, not recently, not at all recently, but has been found and been more talked about recently, is the statue of Aphrodite. The statue was found in 1820 on the Greek island of Milos and was acquired almost immediately by the Marquis, the French ambassador to Greece at the time. The Marquis presented the statue to King Louis the 18th, I believe it was, who donated her to the Louvre in March of 1821. When the statue first arrived, there was some discussion inside about what to do with it. It was suggested that the missing arms should be restored, but the idea was eventually abandoned for fear of changing the nature of the work. Also, the statue was almost confused with the Greek goddess of the sea, Amphitrite. The lack of arms made it hard to identify the statue because it was just a body and just a head, and there's no obvious accurate descriptions of Greek god and goddesses. Many depictions of Greek gods and goddesses contain clues to their identity hidden in the form of attributes, which are objects or natural elements held in their hands. So because the sculpture didn't have any, it was a major problem in the museum. They had to question whether she was the sea goddess Amphitrite worshipped on the island of Milos, or was she Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, which might have been suggested by the half-naked body in the sculpture. The clue of the half-naked body and the jewelry that she once wore tipped the scales in favor of Aphrodite. Another possible clue was found near the statue. It was a hand holding an apple, which was an attribute of Aphrodite. Carved from the same Parian marble, which, I mean, it's pretty hard to mix that up. It's the same exact material, and it fits perfectly into it. But another piece of art that I want to talk about is the statue of Nike. Now, obviously, everybody's heard about Nike, the brand, the sportswear clothing, but something actually that I find really interesting is Nike in Greek mythology is the goddess of victory itself. Nike was a significant figure throughout all of Greek mythology, often depicted with wings and associated with triumph in war and athletics. So if there was victory, there was almost guaranteed to be Nike. And I think that's what the brand Nike does, is tries to associate itself to the idea of winning. If you have Nike, you're going to win. You're going to win. You're going to win if you have Nike product. And I think that's amazing that they can do that off of just Greek culture itself. The statue, however, also known as the Winged Victory, is one of the rarest of the Greek statues because of the exact location is known of where it was found. The exact found location is actually, we know that. The famous statue of Victory bears the name of the Greek island of Samothrace. It's located in the Aegean Sea, where she was discovered in 1863 by a man named Charles. The statue itself was made as an offering to the gods for a sanctuary on the Greek island of Samothrace. Placed at a height, people could see the statue from afar. And that is why now, in a nod to her original lofty home, she now adorns the top of the Daru staircase in the Louvre. The winged victory of Samothrace was placed in her new home on the upper landing in 1883, about 20 years after the statue was discovered. Because of the missing parts, the man who discovered the statue had returned numerous times to try and uncover missing pieces. Charles had went back to Samothrace in 1879 to look for them, but in vain. This second dig yielded the plinth and the prow of the ship that served as the base for the statue. The wings, only partially retrieved, were restored with plaster to fill in the blanks so that Nike could get back her original looks. The statue had been restored several times and has been changing from ever since she was found. I mean, they're constantly changing it and just making tiny little adjustments to try and get as accurate down to that very, just as close as they can to that original piece, which I think is just absolutely amazing that we have the technology and the ability to do that now and recreate original art. I think that it's absolutely fascinating. However, though, the last topic that I do want to talk about is real, like, aside from the mythology and the stories that they tell and the artistic part of it, is real life events. Because you can't have a culture that has no real history. But like, of course, in addition to the tales, folklore, and the art of the ancient Greek, the real history and events are just as important. And I think one of the most important tales in Greek history is the story of the Trojan War. The Trojan War, to be put into simple terms, is a war where the Greeks win a war through trickery involving a famous Trojan horse. According to some legend, the Greeks, with Athena's help, the Greek god Athena, built a huge, like, massive wooden horse that was hollow on the inside. And many Greek were, like, hollow enough, big enough for Greek warriors to hide on the inside of it. The rest of the Greeks' army then pretended to abandon the fight. They had pretended that they were not fighting and they had retreated. They sailed away to a nearby island, leaving the horse behind in front of the gates. The Trojan War was a long, hard-fought battle that lasted around 10 years and ended suddenly in the siege of a city. The siege, which was punctuated by battles and skirmishes, including the storied deaths of the Trojan prince Hector and the nearly invincible Achilles. These battles and skirmishes lasted more than 10 years until the morning of the Greek armies retreated from their camp, leaving a large wooden horse outside of the gates of Troy. After much debate, the Trojans pulled in the mysterious gift into the city. When night fell, however, the horse opened up and a group of Greek warriors, led by Odysseus, climbed out and attacked Troy from within. So even though the war is so widely known across the world and in cultures around us even, some do speculate if the Trojan War was fact or folklore. Many portions of the Trojan War, epics, and stories are difficult to read historically. Several of the main characters are direct offspring of the Greek gods, and much of the action is guided or interfered with by the various competing gods. For example, Paris supposedly won Helen's love after awarding the goddess Aphrodite the golden apple for her beauty. These lengthy sieges and battles were recorded in the era, but even the strongest cities could only hold out for a few months and not a full 10 years. So some just say it just feels a little unrealistic for the time that it was, that the cities weren't staying alive for 10 full years, and the characters and the inclusion of the Greek gods and goddesses. Some speculate that this war may not have ever even happened and have just been so widely populated through story. But nearing the end of it, we've learned that there are many aspects that play into culture, and in this case, Greek culture. We've explored the widespread mythology, ancient architecture, art found in Greece, and real historic events that all took place. So some think. But all of these things create a very rich and interesting history to the country of Greece. Details that you're not going to find in other countries, and just little things that make Greece what it is. When you think of mythology, I tend to think most people would think of Greek mythology with Zeus and Hades and Athena and Aphrodite. Things like those have been so populated and so focused on mainstream that's the first thing you think of. And I think it gives a really beautiful description of what Greek culture is. I think everybody needs to dive into cultures and to understand not only society but the world around us. And I think it's a really beautiful thing when people can do that and come together on certain topics. But this has been Cultures at Midnight. It is now 1:09 in the morning, and I need to get some rest. Do your research, dive into cultures, and stay tuned for the next one.